Let's start right from the very beginning. Why and how did you get into MMA?
I don't know.
I know the pancreas stuff, but
Well, I was fighting over in Japan about maybe close to 2 years when I heard about the original UFC, which was Bob Meyerowitz and SEG, and when Jorge and Gracie was actually putting the fight card together. And one of my fighters came to me and said, "Hey, dude, yeah, check this out. There's this no holds barred thing." The minute I heard no holds barred, I was like, "Okay, whatever. No holds barred is always that gimmick, right? Okay, but it's not real. But we're gonna pretend like you do this." So I never really thought anything of it. And I sent the application in, and then I got a call back. And so I talked to him, and it sounded legit. And I said, "But I have a title defense in Japan." Before, like 3 days prior to this event. So my whole thought process was, I'm going to do my title defense, and I know this thing's not going to happen. I mean, it's bare knuckle, no rules. I mean, you look back in them days, it just doesn't happen. Too many rules and regulations. So I went ahead and did my fight. I went to Japan. I defended my title. I flew into Denver, Colorado, which if anybody realizes how high up you are there, that's like a mile high, right? And you have to sometimes prepare for that. So I go straight from Japan, 3 days. I fly into Denver, Colorado, and I'm preparing for this thing, which I'm not sure what it is yet. And so we get right up to the press conference, and we're hitting these pads to see who has the strongest punch and all these other things going on. And I'm still waiting for this meeting to happen. Like, waiting for them to pull me aside, okay, so this is how it's really going to work, right? So I'm sitting there waiting for it to happen, and it never happens. So, needless to say, the very first fight I seen, when we were in the locker room and all the pads are popping and guys' testosterone is flowing, rah, screaming, and there's probably, at that time, there's only 2 real legitimate grapplers. It's myself and Hoist Gracie. And at the time, really even knew what that was. And so these strikers are on there from boxing to karate to K1 to, all these different striking things and wrestling. And so the first fight goes in, and it's Emmanuel Yarborough and Gerard Godot. Gerard Godot happens to be a Holland kickboxer who fought in K1.
it was Taylor Toulouse, I think.
Taylor Toulouse, that's right.
'cause
Yeah.
Emmanuel was the bigger
Emmanuel
guy.
came after him,
Yeah.
right. But big old sumo guy, right? And he's like 500 pounds. He's 6'4", 500 pounds. And most people never saw anything like that in the ring before, where you got such size, 190 pounds, 6'1" or 6'2", against a 6'5" or 6'4", 6'5", against 500 pounds. And they saw these two people in the ring, and they're going, that sumo guy is just going to absolutely kill this dude, right? And because no one's ever seen this. Fight starts. Gerard goes across the ring, throws a right hand, bam, he hits him, drops him to the floor, and kicks him right in the face. Teeth go flying in the front row. Superfoot Bill Wallace is in there, and Kathy Long are in the front row there. And the teeth go flying into them, right? And literally, they were commentating on this, and they've never seen anything like this before, and they literally went quiet. The audience went quiet. I was in the locker room, and the pads were popping and everything. We had monitors in there watching. The locker room stopped. I mean, it felt like 30 seconds, but it was a split second. But it felt like forever, where you could hear a pin drop everywhere. No one realized what just happened. This dude just got kicked in the face on the ground. I mean, no one ever seen that in a sporting event, right? So the crowd stops. The first thing that's ever said before you start hearing noise was Superfoot Bill Wallace goes, "Oh my God, his teeth just went flying in the front row." And then everybody just started popping and going crazy in the locker room. Literally had a guy back there, Art Jemerson. He had one boxing club and he had no idea what he was getting into. Did not want to fight. I mean, literally backing out. And he's like, I didn't sign up for this. And I looked at you and I go, what part of no holds barred did you not understand, man? You're looking at it. This is the first time anybody's ever said anything for no holds barred that's been really true. This is no holds barred. That set the tone. Right then and there, I think that set the tone for the UFC, what this was about. If it would have been me on there submitting Patrick Smith with a heel hook, they would have crapped all over it. They couldn't understand that. But everybody in the world could understand a guy going to the ground and getting kicked in the face on the ground. I mean, it literally set the tone for what MMA is really about. It's mixed martial arts.
You know where that tooth apparently landed?
I don't.
Apparently right in front of Elaine McCarthy and John McCarthy. Yeah.
That would not surprise me, man. But I remember seeing that, and that was the most real thing, and the way to set the tone for what. And even though it was brutal, I know it was a little over the edge, but I thought it really had to be like that for people to really buy into and go, you know what, this stuff is real. But if it was Hoist Gracie choking out Art Jemerson, or me submitting Pat Smith to a heel hook, That's stuff that they just don't see as being threatening until now. Now they understand it.
See, back in the day, I remember watching UFC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and thinking to myself, what is this Hoist Gracie and Ken Shamrock guy doing? I got to learn this stuff, because I was around with the boys and they're always like, you can't win a fight like that. That's not how you win a fight. I'm like, he just snapped his leg off. He just choked that guy out. He just snapped his arm off. There's something going on here. Did you know that the grappling phenomena would just explode like that after that?
Well, I think when you're in it, you're so focused on what you're doing that you don't even notice what's going on in the outside world and what's developing. So for me, I was so focused in winning championships and winning belts that my goal was to be the very best. And what was going on around me and outside in the world really didn't have an effect on what my goals were. The one thing I did do, though, is I made sure that I stayed in contact with my fans, because even from the start, I always knew that they would be a very big part of my career and a part of my life. So I always knew that I had to be connected to them somehow, some way.
You look at it now, UFC 159, there's a Fox show this weekend, UFC 159 next weekend. We're approaching the 20-year anniversary. You've had just a crazy career, ups and downs, left, right, center. If you look back at all right now, what goes through your mind? You think, man, that was 19, almost 20 years ago, and look where we are now.
I look at it, and I look at the expansion. I look at the money. I look at the athletes, and I looked how much it's changed what MMA started out as and what it is today. Part of it I'm happy for, and part of it I'm unhappy for. I knew going into this early on that someday this would become a business. And when it became a business, it would take some of the fun out of it. So I was really happy that in the beginning I was able to be a part of something that was so fun and so exciting and yet so explosive. And I didn't have to worry about all the other things that people have to worry about today. Now I'm doing it and I don't have to make a name for myself, so I don't have to get involved with all that stuff. I do it because I enjoy it and I love it and it's fun. And so I get to do it for my own reasons, not for anybody else's reasons. But when I first started, I was trying to make a name for myself. I literally wanted to go out and be the best in the world. And there's certain things I had to do to accomplish that.
Well, you were. You were considered a pound-for-pound best, especially after the first Severin fight. And then you went to Japan and stuff like that, but you were always still pound-for-pound the best. Now, you look back at the fighter you were, because you were always well-rounded. There was you, there was Marco Ruas, if I remember correctly. The guys who could strike.
Not Marco Ruas. Marco Ruas was a great striker and could defend
on the ground,
but wasn't really a good submission specialist. He was a good defensive guy, but he did not do submissions well. So he was definitely limited on the ground stuff.
So you did your homework on him just in case.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, I knew all those guys. I knew what their strengths and weaknesses were. I was probably the only one that studied film during that time. I studied film on guys. I watched what their habits were.
Is that the byproduct of the very first event when you realized, who is this skinny Brazilian guy? I should have been aware of that, especially when I went back for the heel hook, and he rolled up, right? I think your foot got caught or something in the gi, or you got wrapped up in his gi, and he came up, and then when you rolled, it's like, bang, he's got my neck. Is that the byproduct of that? Start watching tape on these guys?
Exactly what it was, because I underestimated and overestimated myself. The idea of a gi and seeing a gi, being in the United States, to me was a sign of weakness. Because in a fight, spiritually and physically and all the stuff that help you be more confident in yourself, I think it's great. But I think as far as a fight, physical fight, I think it lacks in a lot of different ways. So I looked at that as a weakness. And because, the submission, those type of things never really accumulated with me with the gi, never even matched up with that. So it was really hard for me to put that together, even though I watched him do it. And so I just went in thinking I was just going to crush this guy wearing pajamas. I was going to go and beat him down. And the next thing I know, I got this gi wrapped around my throat and I'm being choked with it. And the first thing that goes through my mind was going, this is illegal, right? They can't use a weapon, right? That's the first thing that goes in my mind. Because I fought with them to let me wear shoes, because when I got there, they told me I couldn't wear shoes. Literally could not wear shoes. I was like, but you guys said this is no holds barred. We should be able to wear shoes. So they took my shoes away. And I remember slipping all over the place, trying to get footing. and he wrapped that gi around as I rolled through. First thing goes into my mind was like, this is not right. This is not fair. You can't do this as I'm being choked. And I tapped out, and I remember thinking to myself,
and the ref had no idea.
Referee was like looking down going, and he's from Brazil. He couldn't even speak English, so no matter what I said to him, he didn't understand me. So Hoist is standing there going, he topped. And I'm looking around trying to figure out what the hell they're talking about. And referee goes, I don't even know how I understood him, but something like a tap. And I said, yeah, I tapped. I'm thinking to myself, I just tapped. And I promised myself it would never happen again. And if you look at any footage in the UFC, I never tapped ever again after that.
The rematch, though, I think you took Hoistdown, which surprised everyone because the guard was this almost like this holy grail of submissions. You do not go in the guard. Even when I took jiu-jitsu back in the day, if you got trapped in the guard, number one is to get out. Guys like you and Tito were like, no, I'm good here.
Right.
I'm good. Explain that.
Well, I think there's a comfortableness in the gi. Once you understand how they attack you, it's all the hips. So if you control the hips and follow the hips, then they want to keep you in the guard, then you have the option to just beat the snot out of them right there, because there's nothing they can do to you as long as you control the hips, follow the hips. There's nothing they can do to you. They can't set you up or anything. So all I did was just press down on the hips, just keep them down. Hoist would be trying to move, I'd press him down, and then I'd pop up and hit him a few times and pop back down. Wasn't the most exciting fight in the world, but it was the most technical fight that I think I've ever been in, as far as timing and when to punch, when not to punch, when to let go, when not to let go, and going against somebody that had so much more experience. I mean, he'd been doing it since he was born. He was probably doing it in his mother's womb. So he was really, really well skilled in what he was doing, and I'd only been doing it for 2.5 years. So I had to pick up very fast, and I learned real fast how to beat the jiu-jitsu game, and that is with leg locks and with hip control, because when they wrap those legs around your hips, the minute they open, they allow you to pop sitting and into leg locks. So you pop and sit, boom, you're right there. Now they're in the defensive position, so like you would be in the guard. But in that situation, because of his skill on the ground, I didn't want to give him an opportunity to get side control or get on top of me. So basically I chose to stay there and just knock the piss out of him until I broke him down and then finish him. And unfortunately, that was the first time they ever put in a time limit, was in that fight.
Wasn't this supposed to be like a just go for 2 hours sort of thing?
Yeah,
that was your game plan.
Yeah, the game plan was I practiced for a 3-hour fight. I'd have a guy come in, every 30 minutes I had a fresh guy come in. And I'd do that for 2 hours straight. I had a fresh guy come in every half hour, boom, boom. And I remember practicing for that fight, and my thought process was I was going to destroy their myth, which means they said they were the best conditioned athlete in the world, and that their submission skills are second to none, and they could beat anybody, anywhere, anytime, any place. And I wanted to smash that. So I wasn't really trying to go for the kill right away. I wanted to slowly beat him down, break him down, beat him down so bad that he couldn't walk, which I did that, and then make him so tired that he just wanted to quit. And then I would submit him. And then I would crush everything that they had. And if you watch the fight, I pop up and I'm as fresh as there is to be, and he basically is hanging on to me. And then his brothers run in and grab him and carry him out of the ring. They don't show that. They cut that film out. They didn't show that part. But they literally carried him out of the ring to the locker room. He was that exhausted. If they had not put in that time limit, I would have been able to prove that theory.
Have you spoken to Hoist ever since? I mean, you guys are running into each other, especially with the Hall of Fame stuff. But if you guys see each other nowadays, is it hi bye sort of thing, or is it always, I wish we could do it again?
No, for me, it's always wish I could do it again. For him, he's glad he doesn't have to. Yeah, I've tried to get that fight to happen several times, and it's not going to happen. It's and I guess in a way I can't blame him. The sport has advanced so much that size does matter.
So you look at the sport now, how it's advanced, and I think it all started obviously when SCG was sold to Zuffa. There's the unified rules of MMA that came in 2001. When you look at that transitional period, the rules to the ownership of the UFC changing, did you ever envision it would become so systematic, like you said, like a business, and it's all about selling pay-per-views sort of thing, and having the right television deals, and now it's getting so big around the world?
I always knew that it was going to turn into, especially after the first couple, and I watched it grow. In the back of my mind, like I said, I didn't focus too much because, like I said, I was in my own world trying to accomplish my goals. But I always knew in the back of my mind that if this thing kept going and it became something special, that it would stop being fun and it would become a business. And then you would have to make your fun out of it. And so I knew that was going to happen. With anything and coming from where I came from, struggling and coming from group homes and things, and then being able to make it, I understood what it was for money and power. I knew how that worked. And I knew that once it got to that point, then there would be a lot of political pull in a lot of different directions, a lot of things going on that you know, most people don't know about, and if they did, they'd be upset. And that's just, but that's not just with, you know, MMA, that's with any sport. I mean, it's always going to be like that when you got power and money that gets involved. And that's what UFC, that's what MMA became, was a power and money business.
You talk about growing up the way you did. I've met, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of fighters, professional athletes. We all have some sort of story of struggle when we were young, getting to where we have to be now. You look back at that, was there a time where you almost felt sorry for yourself and now you change your mind, perhaps think, you know what, I needed that to be the man that I am today?
I never felt sorry for myself. That you do that and you're done. You don't have time for that, you know. First thing you do is you've got to, you know, it's kind of, I mean, crossing over, but man, you got to take what's yours. I mean, you can't be soft. You can't feel sorry for anybody else if you make somebody else lose what they've got. It's this power struggle. When you're coming from that deep and trying to pull yourself out of that kind of crap, you got to step on a few heads. And unfortunately, it's either you or them. And, you know, I'm a survivor, and I stepped on a lot of heads.
It's survival of the fittest. Does it ever backfire on you, though?
Absolutely. I mean, I always, you know, I think what comes around goes around, you know, and I've done some bad things in my life, no doubt. Just for the nature and the people I was around and the culture that I came from. It was built into me, and I had to slowly build that out of me. And I've done some bad things, and I've had some bad karma for that. So I've been paid back several times over again, but I don't step back and go, you know what, I wish that would have never happened. It's unfair. You know what, this is life. And the minute you start thinking about that, man, you're done. You just need, I've always been this way. I don't care what someone's done to me. I don't look back on what somebody's done to me. I look forward and I don't let it happen again. I don't do the same thing over again. And if I see that same face down the road, I'm going to make sure that I don't get burned again. I'm going to make sure that they know I ain't going to get burned again.
If there was no Bob Shamrock in Ken Shamrock's life, where would Ken be?
Oh my goodness. Wow. I mean, we can always say, you know, what could have happened. But I like to think that I was a survivor. But I also know that I would have survived in a different way. You know how you have shot callers and different things and different organized crime and different stuff like that. And I was always a tough guy. I always had a hard punch. I always, you know, came out on top. Even in grade school, I was always the toughest kid. I went into a group home at 13 years old, a month away from my 14th birthday. When I turned 15 years old, I ran the house. I ran the house. And these are all 18 boys coming from a bad background, and I was only 145 pounds. And so I had that scrap in me, and I could wrestle a little bit. And so I ran that house at a young age, and I always have been that way. Always the guy in charge. And even in the bad way, the guy in charge. And so I think that if time would have gone on and I hadn't had Bob Shamrock in my life, my father, who showed me the right way to direct my anger and my leadership, I would probably have been a pretty bad person, calling the shots in the wrong direction.
What was he like? Was he a tough guy, or was he just very calm and just always put you guys back to where you need to be?
You know, I guess I could explain it a way that some people would understand it, some people wouldn't. I remember one time I was in the room and somebody didn't vacuum the room right. I think I had been 14. I was there maybe a year, close to my 15th birthday, and I was just starting to fit in. And this guy came in, and I was in charge of my room. This is when I started getting some credibility. And he put me in charge of my room. And there was a kid in there, he was 17 years old. And he was supposed to vacuum the room that day. And I was in charge of making sure the room was clean and, you know, everything was done right. And this guy didn't do that. And I told him, hey, did you vacuum the room? And he said, no. And I said, you get up there and get it done. I mean, this is some stupid stuff, but I mean, this is life. This is learning how to be a leader and doing it the right way. And he told me he didn't need to do it. So I caught him up in the room. I didn't go right away. You know, I've got a brain on myself. I don't want anybody to see what's going on. So I waited. He goes up into the room. I closed the door and I said, you know what? You're going to vacuum the room now, but you can do it with your face. And so I ended up putting him on the ground and I started beating shit out of him. Sorry. So they hear all this ruckus, all the boys, and they all crowd around. And of course, downstairs the counselors hear it, and then once the counselors hear it, then Bob Shamrock hears it. So they come up in the room and they, what's all this going on for? And this dude was all bloody. And here's this little 145-pounder. This guy probably weighed about 200 pounds. He's crying. And I say, you didn't vacuum the room. And you just calmness in my dad, right? And he says, I want you guys all to leave. And I'm thinking he's going to sit me down and talk to me and, you know, trying to explain things to me. And he literally grabbed me by the back of the neck, slammed me in one closet, boom, back out into another closet, then into the bed, into the wall. I mean, all over the room. And when he was done, he says, you like how that feels? I didn't understand what are you talking about? I mean, this guy in fact knew what I told you. He says, a much easier way to do things. You can either talk to them and work things out, or you can get violent and do it this way. And he says, if you do this, I'm going to do this. I put it together. And so then I started trying to talk to people. I still didn't do everything the right way a lot of times. I had a short temper. But I understood what he was talking about. It connected with me like, you know, you got a voice. You got a voice that people listen to. Just like with him. All he had to do was sit down and talk to me, and I would have listened to him. I mean, I always did. And he could have done the same thing then. But he knew that in that situation, the only way I was going to understand what he was talking about was do the same thing I did to him, to this kid. And then I would understand it. And so then I understood how powerful talking could be, because then when you finally got to a point where you can't talk anymore, then you can resort to that. But most of the time you can get, because of the leaderships that I had and the, you know, as much weight as my voice had carried, that I could get away with just talking with these kids to get things done. I didn't have to be very violent.
You mentioned you have a short temper. You're also a guy that, when I've looked back at your career, word is bond. It's an old saying, word is bond. But if you want to talk to someone, you'll talk. But if they break their word, i.e. Japan, Guy Mezger, there's going to be some hell to pay. So if you look back at that, when people break their word to you and you're willing to sit down with them, but they break their word, why does that keep coming back out? Because I remember when you were freaking out about that whole situation with Mezger and I think it was Sakuraba the fight.
Sakuraba.
I told everyone, don't talk to me. Like Shamrock's losing it here. This could get ugly. Those Japanese guys are going to be in big trouble if Shamrock gets a hold of them. So when you look back at that and think to yourself, should I have handled it differently, or no, I need to make a statement that day?
Now, that was one of those times where I didn't get physical, but it was a time where I had to put a stop to that action. What was going on was that, you know, Guy Mezger didn't want to take that fight because he had a sore foot. Yeah. He had injured it. And so they said that it was a 3-round fight and that there was some overtime if they couldn't come to a decision on who won the fight. And I told him, I said, Guy will fight 3 rounds, this much time, and that's it because he's hurt. I said, and you can have him, but if we go any farther than that, I said, he's not going to be able to perform very long. So I think we can get by with 3 rounds in this much time, and I think we can get by with that. But we're not going to be doing overtime after overtime. And so we made a deal. And so the fight happens, and Guy, I thought, won the fight in those 3 rounds. Well, they didn't want to leave it at that because Guy had won the fight. So they wanted to go an extra round, which is what Japan does, though. They do the extra round. Well, I specifically told them and had an agreement with Guy that he was not going to do the extra rounds. You will decide in 3 rounds, period. And they did that only because they knew they could not award Sakuraba the fight in those 3 rounds. So what they had to do was make us look bad by me jumping in the ring and creating that thing so they could disqualify Guy. But there was no way Guy could go on in that next round. And so I protected Guy. And I told him to go back to the locker because I didn't want him to be the one complaining. I didn't want him to want to say, hey, you know, and he wouldn't have. He'd have gone on with it and he would have lost the fight because he was really starting to slow down. He wasn't in shape to do it. He couldn't train the way he needed to. and we could, guys in good enough shape to get to go those 3 rounds. I knew that. And so I pushed Guy out, and I pushed the corner out, and I basically took charge to shield them guys from getting any bad press from that. And it worked, but they disqualified Guy. But that's the only way that Sakharov was going to win that 3-round fight, is if they disqualified Guy.